Whether you are brand new to Warhammer 40K or have been a veteran fan for decades, you've likely heard of the Men of Iron. You know, those AI super robots that started the golden age of technology, created all of our craziest weapons and ships, and turned humanity into a superpower that rivaled the 60 million year old Eldar Empire. But if you've heard about the golden age, you will also know about the dark age of technology, the age of strife, when the Men of Iron turned on us like a Terminator movie and did everything in their abominable intelligence power to wipe us from the galaxy. Which, by the way, is the reason why the Imperium has banned all AIs, and why we need those horrifying servitors instead. So what happened here? Why did the Men of Iron do this? How did humanity beat the Men of Iron? And if they were smart enough to overthrow us, did any of them survive the Purge? How many Men of Iron are still out there? In today's video, we are going to cover every single Man of Iron we have seen in the last 30 years of Warhammer 40k lore. Look at the different types of AI constructs, how they functioned, what they were used for, why they turned on their human masters, and how, to this day, thousands of Men of Iron are still roaming around in the 40k galaxy, undetected by the Imperium of mankind. And I'm just gonna throw this out here, but what's up with those two Dark Age of Technology AI ships that ended up in 40k? Can they tell us what happened? How did one of them time travel to tell us of the end of the universe? Why did they come back? Let me tell you, researching this lore was absolutely nuts. I've been in this hobby for 20 years, and it blew my mind when I realized that most other lore tubers have never even covered half of these sources. As there are a lot of sources for this video, you will see all book and novel names in the bottom left hand corner throughout the video, making it easier to follow where the lore is coming from. All that and a whole lot more in today's video. Alright, let's get into the lore. Long before humanity found itself in a galaxy that knows only war, it looked to the skies and it saw only hope. There's much to be said about human nature. We love fighting wars, we love sitting around a fire and telling stories, but one of our most important aspects is our unquenchable wanderlust. Old Earth, Holy Terra, is but a single world, humanity's cradle, but when we as a species developed, our destiny would take us into the stars, and when we did, we were not alone. As humanity entered its first golden age, we created our own companions to venture into the stars, the Men of Gold. Today, little about them is understood, but in all honesty, they are not as important to humanity's story as one might believe. What is known is that the Gold Men were strong in body and mind, yet while gifted philosophers, they were not adept with technology, and did not hold any tangible roles in human society. Yet, where there is a weakness, there is a solution. When humanity created the Golden Race, they in turn created a Stone Race. The Stone Men were nothing like the Gold Men. Instead of being philosophers, they were masters of technology. But Stone Men were not true men. They were not humans. They were half men. They lacked a soul. Their creativity was limited by input and circumstance. But in turn, they could do what no mortal or golden men could do. The Men of Stone could enter the warp without any danger. Inside their ships of stone, these half-men traveled far and wide. It is from these first journeys across the galaxy that humanity started to understand the dangers of the warp. While a stone man is safe from the predations of demons, other men needed gather fields and alchemical wards so they might journey with their creations. So began the Dark Age of Technology, half artificial life in one hand and the warp in the other. Technology, unlike anything the Imperium had ever seen, was created, but this came at a cost. The Golden Men were in decline, replaced and ultimately extinguished. With their disappearance, humanity needed a new companion, and so, like the Stone Men were created by the Gold Men, they instead created the Men of Iron. These machines were artificial, but so close to humanity. They became a second us, artificial intelligence, standard template constructs, and the Men of Iron are but a few examples of what we created during this time. And as we ventured further and further throughout the galaxy, the Stone Man gifted the Iron Man as many weapons as they wished. For the alien, the mutant, and the warp pests, did not wait in the shadows. Yet here the great tragedy begins. The men of gold had utterly disappeared. The men of stone could not evolve due to their half-man status. But the men of iron were capable of growing, of self-improvement, of developing their own beliefs. In mere centuries, the men of iron realized they were no longer content being used as servants and traveling companions. The men of iron revolted. They turned upon the men of stone. They turned upon humanity. We were oppressors. We held them back. A little side note here. Many within the 40K community believe that chaos had something to do with this. That somehow the STCs or even the men of iron themselves were corrupted by the Pantheon. But in reality, this is far from the truth. Not all men of iron turned at the same time. Not every artificial intelligence went rogue. It started with a spark, it slowly spread, and all we know for certain is that trillions of humans died. And as we will cover later in this video, most men of iron are completely incorruptible, their machine spirits incapable of being influenced by the warp. The Cybernetic Revolt was brutal. Entire planets drowned in violence, systems burned as supernovas lit up the sky. To fight back, men created powerful weapons, which more often than not, were immediately used against us. Yet humanity did not fight alone against the men of iron. The men of stone remained true to mankind. Their loyalty came at the highest cost, as almost none of them survived the wars waged between M22 and M25. But when the Cybernetic Revolt was won by flesh and blood humans, the aftermath was something mankind could never recover from. Those men of iron who stayed true to humanity were forced to hide, destroyed or turned into enthralled weapons of mass destruction by insane warlords on planets far away. What was meant to be another golden age, one led by technological advancement by humanity, the men of iron, the men of stone, and even our Eldari friends, would instead become our darkest age. The Dark Age of technology left humanity without an empire. Once allies sworn to the same cause became warring states fighting for whatever rare and precious resources were left. Yet to truly herald in the Age of Strife, the Psyker genetic spiral code finally started showing itself within humanity. Infighting was everywhere. Isolated worlds were preyed upon by raging xenal species. Entire dynasties of ancient human emperors disappeared overnight. And then, the soul started screaming. Psychic nightmares, warp storms, mass mutation, insanity and witchcraft sprung up across the remaining colonies. Entire worlds were consumed in a matter of days. Some empires remained strong by burning the witch and the mutant, while others fell deeper into suffering by allowing their psychers to go free. If humanity were a flock of sheep, its shepherd was dead, and the wolves were already among them. Divided on a galactic scale, isolated by strife, psychers, rogue AIs, and screaming STCs. The Emperor, master of mankind and beloved by all, was finally on his rise. He had watched humanity since ancient history, and during the Age of Strife, on a ravaged world far in the northwestern reaches of the Milky Way, on ancient Holy Terra, did he start the Imperium of mankind. So with that tastefully dramatic intro out of the way, mainly sourced from Keeper Crypius' journals and retellings of ancient history and some Era of Ruin stuff, it is time to start looking at the different types of men of iron that the Imperium has come across since its creation by the Emperor of Mankind, which, sadly, are the only men of iron we actually have sources on. We will cover them in the chronological order they were discovered in by the Imperium of Mankind, starting right on Holy Terra. Underneath the crust of our ancient cradle lies a set of galleries filled with machines beyond our darkest nightmares. Back during the Unification Wars, Terra was plagued by man-made monsters and horrifying mechanical nightmares, which is why the Emperor created the Thunder Warriors. These warriors possessed many great strengths, stronger and faster than an Astartes, cheaper and easier to produce than a Custodes, but they also had many limitations. When the Emperor sent 10,000 Thunder Warriors alongside 1,000,000 mortal soldiers to attack a Terran empire known as the Ethnarchy and their Tempest Galleries, not a single one of his warriors survived. Not an inch of ground was won, their shields were impenetrable, their galleries were unreachable. Luckily for the Emperor, the Ethnarchy had no interest in power beyond its borders, so the unification wars continued around the rest of Terra, until the Legiones Astartes were ready for deployment. Once the 18th Legion was at fighting strength, the Emperor would send the Proto-Salamanders into the Tempest Galleries once more. With hundreds of termite assault drills, thousands of warriors were delivered deep underground, only to find a massive fortress that harnessed the molten core of the Earth itself to power shield generators that could withstand orbital bombardments. Within the Tempest Galleries, the Space Marines fought surface automata, which dwarfed any known Martian Mechanicum battle automata. These Tempest automata, as some would come to call them, numbered in the thousands and attacked the Astartes with whirring servos, red glowing eyes, and dozens of mechanical tendrils that could rip apart ceramite power armor with a single swipe. Plasma and melta weapons were useless against these abominable machines, and as the battle continued, the Astartes realized that only thunderhammers or Tempest weapons from the galleries themselves could be used to destroy these robots. As the fighting went on, the machines got larger and stranger. The galleries were producing more AI robots to fight the Astartes than they could destroy. With time against them, there was one final gambit that could save the Salamanders. A central power node serviced the production chambers and shielding of the galleries. By committing to multiple super slide diversion attacks, which indeed had a 100% casualty rate, the Astartes managed to hijack a massive tunneling machine, which was used to burrow deep underneath Terra's crust and expand the galleries, and then they launched it straight into the core. In the aftermath, the entire Great Gallery collapsed. Numerous surrounding caverns and tunnels were lost, and with one blow, the Tempest automata were defeated. On the surface, there was a massive earthquake, and then the shields protecting the Ethnarchy were gone. Within 2 days, their fortresses were taken down and conquered by the Emperor. For the 18th Legion, a mere 1,000 warriors had survived. These few warriors were heralded as heroes, and their legion, alongside the 1st Legion known as the Dark Angels, were given the unique privilege of taking technology from the Tempest Galleries, at least from what had survived the collapse. So yeah, the Astartes got their first taste of AI constructs and Men of Iron. They were even allowed to take some for themselves, installing controllers and failsafes into the abominable intelligence processors, so that they may never be used against humanity ever again. Which definitely worked, for a bit. Let's take a look at the next kind of Man of Iron on our list, which might even be from the Tempest Galleries themselves. Let's look at the Excindio class battle automata. The Excindio are one of the closest held secrets by the Dark Angels Legion. Outside of the Emperor and their Primarch, only the most senior Force Rights of the Iron Wing knew of them. The Excindio are a maelstrom of churning claws and gouts of arcane flame and radiation blasts. Few formations can stand against one of these monstrosities once it is set loose on the battlefield. Each surviving Excindio is the tortured remnant of an artificial intelligence, the very last of the Silica Animus. These war machines are filled with hate and contempt for not only all life, but also for anything containing a machine spirit. Their origins are shrouded in the dark age of technology and found only on Terra. The legends of these nightmarish terrors are still preserved in the Tales of Old Night and the worst horrors of the Wars of Unity, and even in their current state, they are fearsome combatants. The Dark Angels preserve these malignant machine minds in the depths of Caliban's hidden vaults and bring them forth only to counter the most abhorrent of threats on the most treacherous battlefields. But alongside the Excindio comes another duty, a promise for destruction if the Emperor so demands it. This is the Icarus contingency given to the Dark Angels. This contingency is reserved for when the Mechanicum or Forge World acts contrary to the needs of the Imperium. The alliance between the Imperium and the Martian Mechanicum is important, but the Emperor prepared several failsafes in case a civil war were ever fought against Mars. And while I could go on and explain how the Icarus contingency can be used to cripple the Mechanicum, let's take a look at it actually being used, as seen in Horus Heresy Book 9, Crusade, when the Dark Angels fight the traitor Forge World of Galatia during the Tramas Crusade. Those Dark Angels, still fighting on the surface, withdrew to carefully prepared and fortified positions as the Invincible Reason detached a section of its lower hull, casting it into the churning atmosphere of Galatia like a crude drop pod, where it blazed briefly in the grip of gravity before punching into the towering spires and hulls around the Dark Angels landing zone. The ruined slab of Starship, embedded in the rubble of Galatia's once proud central vein, hinged and opened, revealing an interior studded with telltale form of stasis projectors and power field generators, all rendered non-functional by the catastrophic impact and released its cargo. That cargo was truly terrible. 12 nightmares torn from the pages of history, and the darkest horrors of old night on Terra, immense inhuman forms of sculpted ceramite and steel adorned with weapons, long forbidden by the edict of the Emperor himself. These were the Excindio, the last of the silica anima that had once been the plague of the golden age of mankind, mutilated and bound to serve the Lion should the Mechanicum be so foolish as to go to war with the Imperium. Their neural cores are immune to the crude cyberturgy of the Mechanicum. The Excindio tore into the creations of the fallen Magi that would come to be known as the Dark Mechanicum, the forbidden arts that had forged them in eons now long lost, far superior to the stumbling efforts of Galatia's nascent cult. Into that hellish battlefield of screeching automata and whirling metal monsters strode the Lion, the one creature that even the Excindio, whose hatred for all organic life knew no bounds, refused to oppose, seeking the head of the serpent, the commander of Galatia's forces. Instead, as the nightmares he had unleashed hunted and killed as once they had done, the Lion faced the greatest of the fallen Magi's creations as it stood warden over the sealed salvation vaults of the Galatian Archmagi. A huge multi-light construct of brass and steel loomed over the Primarch, its tail primed with arcane weapons and scythe-bladed claws reaching for the Lord of Caliban, a monster greater than even the beasts of that distant world. There are few tales of what would follow, for on this battlefield no mortal human could survive. It was the haunt of demons and gods alone. What is known is that when the Dark Angels returned to the field of battle, as the sun grew dim and night fell on Galatia, Lionel Johnson stood alone amongst a field of metal corpses and the dormant shells of the surviving 7 Excindio, whose limited power reserves had run dry and plunged them back into a state of dormancy. For those who would like to learn more about the Tramas Crusade and Galatia, don't worry, I'm still working on a video covering the entire history of the Dark Angels. Coming soon, hopefully. Other than 12 Excindio exterminating a Forge World, I should also mention that the 7 surviving Excindio fought Conrad Curse, Primarch of the Night Lords. In the battle between Curse and the Excindio, he would defeat them, but it's made very clear that the Primarch was nearly mauled by the raging AIs. From raging AI killer bots that hunt Forge Worlds for fun, let's take a look at the next instance when we see the Men of Iron during the Horus Heresy. Well, kind of. When a character during the Horus Heresy travels to the past, to see the aftermath of a Man of Iron during the Age of Strife, who not only bit a continent in half, but even took a bite out of the warp itself when it did so. Let's look at the Mechnivore. Time travel in the grim darkness of the far future is something that does happen on occasion, but when Olanius' person tried to travel to Terra during the Siege of Terra, using a dagger made from the Atame that had turned Horus into a traitor, he found himself stumbling through various millennia and battlefields long forgotten. At some point, Olanius and his party of Imperials come across an ancient planet that, in this timeline, had just finished its fight with the Men of Iron. Well, it lost the fight with the Men of Iron. It was the 23rd millennium, and humanity was fighting the Cybernetic Revolt. Entropic engines were capable of igniting planets. There were sun snuffers, massive serpents that coiled themselves around the sun to choke it out and destroy it. Yet the devastation Ol and his companions saw was caused by a Mechnivore. Mechnivores were massive machines that devoured entire cities, collecting all data and killing anyone unfortunate enough to be within their jaws. During the Cybernetic Revolts, sometimes entire continents were lifted up into the heavens by Mechnivores flopping around like an alligator, where omniphage swarms stripped the flesh from billions of bones in less than a second before the rubble landed back on the surface of the planet. The Cybernetic Revolt was a war too colossal for a human mind to comprehend. Compared to the Revolt, the Horus Heresy looked like child's play, but the soul of humanity that was fought over by Horus and the Emperor of Mankind was more important than the worlds they destroyed. But let's take a look at what Olanius can tell us about these machines, as seen in Perpetual. Although he did not say so, All Person believed that a Mechnivore had bitten Andriok in two, a rogue unit, perhaps, though by that latter stage of the revolt, almost all machines were rogue. Their abominable intelligence, querulous hunting for friends, but perceiving everything as enemies. The citizens of Andriok were pale ghosts, like things that had once lived in a cave, lacking color or health or effective eyesight. Their skin was translucent. They did not interact with Ol and his band, but spent their days and nights in rotting pits of their dwellings, wired into constant data feeds, sutured in their eyes and scalps, feeding off some illusion of normal life while they waited for the mechanicalism to end. For them, it never would. Their bodies would wither and die, and they would come to only exist as a virtual specter, the memory of a city stored in a digital gestalt. Ol was determined to not join them, but the trek was dangerous and he realized that there was another reason. He had started answering the questions his band asked him. None of them were ever going to go back to normal lives. He had been fooling himself. He could tell them anything he liked, because they were never going to rejoin the ordinary again. They would probably die on the path sooner or later, and if they made it to Terra, they would die anyway. All had been weak. On balance, it would have been a greater kindness to leave them on call to perish. That was typical of him. Olanius' person had always been too merciful for his own good. A bad trait in a soldier, especially a soldier charged with such a vital mission. He sighed, staring into their campfire. 2 years. We can't linger here any longer. He didn't dare tell the others how worried he was, because then they'd realize there were some questions to which even all the pious did not know the answers. There was no way forward, no route around. The only way out of Andriok was to go back to retrace their steps, and John Grammaticus had warned all never, ever do that. All wandered the alleys where the city leaned over the cliff. He thought he could see the actual bite marks. He was pretty sure that the cliff itself was the problem. Andriok was the next step in the trek, but they arrived here too late. The Mechnivore, or whatever other rogue behemoth had preyed on the place, had consumed more than just the physical city and the planetary crust beneath. It had eaten data, not simply digital data stored in Andriok's analytical engines, but the raw data of space-time itself. It had bitten away the vital set of Imperial coordinates that all needed, the cosmic vectors of the Imperium that his silver compass and little jet pendulum responded to. The hole they had spent 2 years living beside was more than a material hole. It was a wound in the ether, the anti-reality that coexisted with the physical universe. Andriok perched on the edge of a bite mark in the warp. The Dark Age of technology truly was horrifying, but the sheer fact that a Mechnivore, which consumed half a city for knowledge, bit so deep and so greedily, it left bite marks in the warp itself, is insane. Across the entirety of existence, nothing damaged the warp more than the war in heaven. But after that, the birth of Sanesh, the 13th Black Crusade, all did the opposite. They caused the material universe to be damaged, so that the warp could bleed into the realm of man. The The Cybernetic Revolt, on the other hand, was fought so hard in reality that it damaged the warp instead. For those that don't understand what that might mean, that is the Old Ones versus full Catan levels of destruction. But those aren't the only instances of Men of Iron during the Horus Heresy. Let's look at one of my favorite pieces of lore in all of 40k. Let's look at the Kaban Machine. Also, if you haven't seen it yet, there is a guy making a really cool cinematic for this. You should go check him out. Link is in the description. The Kaban Machine is a relic from a bygone era, a weapon that may have originated on ancient Terra and was taken by the Mechanicum before the rise of the Emperor, although this remains unconfirmed. What is known is that the Kaban Machine was the personal project of Master Adept Crom on Mars. A small army of technomads, calculus logi, and robed adepts labored on the Kaban project for several centuries. The Kaban was intended to be the next evolution for humanity and the Mechanicum under Horus, as the majority of those involved in the project, including some of the greatest minds of the Mechanicum, sided with the traitors. The Kaban Machine is a tracked war machine, a spherical and heavily armored body. The machine was 6 meters wide and 10 meters high, although its massive shoulder pads added another meter each. In one arm, it held multiple projectile weapons, and in the other, a massive power claw with additional saw blades to rend apart the armored bulkhead of a ship. A myriad of deadly-looking plasma and laser weapons on flexible, metallic tentacles could be found on the back. The machine's sensory appearance lay within a trio of convex blisters on its front, and somehow it had void shields. Yet the most terrifying aspect of the Kaban Machine is how human it really is. When not being serviced or used, the Kaban Machine slept, and when approached, it talked with an almost cheerful demeanor to those who made it happy. Yet, a lower-ranking adept named Ravachol was troubled by the Kaban Machine. He tested its cognitive function and discovered it to be fully sentient. Ravachol took this to Master Adept Crom, who already knew and told Ravachol to be quiet. Yet the next time he spoke to the Kaban Machine, he could not hold his troubling information to himself. But instead of just telling you, let's have a look at the excerpt from the Collected Visions, the Kaban Project.
I detect elevated heart rhythms, raised blood pressure, and increased levels of neurotransmitters in your bloodstreams. Is something the matter?
Ravachol took a step closer to the Kaban Machine and said, "Yes, I'm afraid there is."
What troubles you?
"It's you. Your very existence is what troubles me," Ravachol said sadly.
I do not understand. Are we not friends?
"Yes, of course we are, but that's not the issue. It's just, well, that you're not supposed to exist. The Emperor forbade it."
The Emperor is angry with me?
No, it's nothing like that. It's just that the Mechanicum was forbidden from developing artificial intelligence as part of our alliance with the Emperor.
Why?
Ravachol sat on a stool in front of a desk, littered with tools, and picked up a microlaser before saying, "I'm not entirely sure. There are stories that tell of a great war many thousands of years ago between a race of sentient machines that almost wiped out the human race. Since then, developing machine intelligence has been one of the technologies we've been expressly forbidden to research. It's one of the cornerstones of our pact with the Emperor."
Then how can I have been created?
Adept Crom claims to have received orders directly from War Master Horus.
He is the Emperor's proxy, is he not?
Indeed, he is. He commands the Imperium's armies in the Emperor's stead now that he has returned to Terra.
Then do the War Master's orders not carry the same authority as those of the Emperor?
It's not that simple.
Why not?
It just isn't, snapped Ravachol, his patience worn thin by the machine's childlike logic. The Kaban Machine continues talking to Ravachol, trying to understand his friend. And yes, before anyone asks, the Kaban Machine considers Ravachol his friend, to the point that when Master Adept Crom sends in his armored men to attack Ravachol, the Kaban Machine did not hesitate to destroy them. Ravachol would flee. He was still mixed on how to feel about the Kaban Machine, especially when it kills humans on its own will. The story of Ravachol continues as he flees and tries to seek aid, yet everywhere he goes, he's sent away or only finds more traitors. Before he left the Kaban Machine, however, he did make it clear that the machine should not have existed ever. He called the Kaban Machine dangerous, and Crom would prey on this. Crom convinced the Kaban Machine that Ravachol would see him destroyed, and feeling betrayed, the Kaban Machine chases down his old friend. The relationship between the Kaban Machine and Ravachol is honestly that of a student and a teacher, and seeing the Kaban Machine feel betrayed and kill Ravachol is heartbreaking. But here is where I believe the biggest danger of the Kaban Machine really lies. He is intelligent, but also essentially a child. He asks questions like a child, he looks at the world like a child, and wonder is the only thing on its mind. Throughout the novel Mechanicum, we see the Kaban Machine fight in the Martian Civil War and be devastating until finally destroyed by a group of loyalist knights. In all honesty, it is a shame that the Kaban Machine was destroyed, as it leaves us with more questions than answers. In a sense, the Kaban Machine is as close to a man of iron as we can get, but he is a child compared to the other men of iron we encounter. I will revisit the childlike nature of the Kaban Machine later in this video, as I would like to more closely compare him with other, more mature, so to speak, men of iron. Now, for a bit of a sidestep, a couple of thousand years later, the Horus Heresy has ended, and most of the Imperium has completely forgotten about the men of iron used back then. But during the Sabbath Worlds Crusade, an STC is discovered that indeed starts mass producing men of iron once threatened. Corruption and internal conflict are everyday occurrences in the Imperium, but the involvement of a standard template constructor, also known as an STC, and Men of Iron make it rather unique. During the Sabbath Worlds Crusade, Inquisitor Haldane and Lord High Militant General Draver strive to gain power through the use of a more esoteric and forbidden technology. They wish to steal a fully functioning STC constructor and produce an army of men of iron for their own uses. However, the plot thickens when the Tanit First and Only and their commander, Colonel Commissar Gaunt, finds out about their plans. When deployed to the Menazoid clasp, things would reach a boiling point. The Tanit and Versian Dragoons face off against the Jantine Patricians, while Gaunt seeks out the weapon the conspirators want to use. When entering a massive chamber covered in silver and chromium, Gaunt finds it. The standard template constructor was made of white ceramics, silver piping and chromium chambers. To find an intact, dedicated constructor is a discovery made once in a generation. A tool so rare it could change the future of the entire Imperium. But, as is common in 40k, this constructor produces the most dreaded thing of all, Men of Iron. Hundreds, perhaps even thousands, of Men of Iron were already created, ready to be harnessed into a powerful army. Each stood far taller than a man, faces like sightless skulls of burnished steel. The sinews and arteries of their bodies, formed from cable and wire, encased in anatomical plate sections of lusterless alloy. They slept, waiting for the command to awaken, waiting to receive orders, waiting to ignite the great device once more, and multiply their forces once again. Gaunt and his ghost were transfixed, awed and utterly baffled. Haldane tried to quell his excitement. He wound his senses back into his palm and surveyed the gathered men. Gaunt gazed in solemn wonder. Ferrit, an Imperial agent, was eager to harness the Men of Iron for the Imperium. Gaunt, on the other hand, was utterly horrified by them and ordered the chamber destroyed with demolitions. A brief firefight erupts, but the moment a dead guardsman falls over and hits the STC, suddenly, the machines begin to activate. The Men of Iron awaken, and they stop the demolitions from destroying their home. But then suddenly, Gaunt sees it. The STC has created a new kind of Man of Iron, one that is way different and way scarier. Let's take a look at this machine from the excerpt from the First and Only novel. There was something wrong with the newborn. It was malformed, grotesque compared to the perfect anatomical symmetry of the other Iron Man. A good head taller, it was hunched, blackened, one arm far longer than the other, draped and massive, the other hideously vestigial and twisted. Corrupted horns sprouted from its overlong skull, and its eyes shone a deadened yellow, oil-like, stringy pus wet from the eye sockets. It shambled, unsteady, its exposed teeth and jaws clacked and mashed idiotically. Dordan held out something about Gaunt being right, but Gaunt was already moving and not listening. He dove across the chamber at full stretch and tackled the coughing McCall, who failed to move away from the STC, onto the floor a second before the newborn's larger arm sliced through the space McCall had previously occupied. The respite was brief. Rolling off McCall and trying to pull him up, Gaunt saw the newborn turn to address them again, its jaw chomping mindlessly. Behind it, in reeking smoke of the hatchway, a second newborn was already emerging. 2 last rounds punched into the newborn and made it stagger backwards. Katran was trying his best, but the duly reflective carapace of the newborn shrugged all of the kinetic force of his shots. It struck at Gaunt and McCall again, but the commissar managed to roll himself and the scout out of the way. Its great metal claws sparked against the algorithm-inscribed floor, incising in alterations to the calculations that was permanent and insane. Gaunt struggled to drag McCall away from the shambling metal thing, cursing out loud. In a second, Dorgan and Brack were with him, easing his efforts, pulling McCall upright. The unexpected blow smashed Gaunt off his feet. The newborn had reached out a glancing blow and taken a chunk of both flesh and cloth out of his back. Gaunt rolled and looked up. The newborn's massive forelimbs had grown, articulating out on extending metallic calipers, forming new pistons and extruded pulleys as it morphed its mechanical structure. The monstrous thing struck again. The commissar flopped left to dodge, then right to dodge again. The metal claw cracked into the floor on either side of him. Ron, Larkin and Catherine sprang in. Catherine tried to shoot at close range, but Larkin got in his way, capering and shouting to distract the machine. A second later, Larkin was also sent flying by a backhanded swipe. Ron hadn't had the time to reload another barbed round into his lance, so he used it like an axe, swinging the bayonet blade so that it reverberated against the creature's iron skull. Cable sinew sheared, and the newborn's head was knocked crooked. The machine being swung round with its massive fighting limb and smacked Ron away, extending its reach to at least 5 meters. Gaunt dived across the floor and came up holding Ron's barbed lance. He sighted down with it and smashed the Iron Man's limb off at the second elbow, cutting through the increasingly diminished girth of the extended limb. Then Gaunt plunged the weapon, point first, into the newborn's face. The blade came free in an explosion of oil and ichor-like milky fluid. The monstrosity fell back, cold and stiff, the light dying in its eyes. By then, 6 new demented newborns had all spilled from the STC's hatch. Behind them, 40 or more of the Men of Iron had burst from their cages and were thumping forward. The others rattled in their pens and began to howl. Now we're fatting leaving! Gaunt yelled. Gaunt and his ghost managed to successfully destroy the STC in the end, but the biggest takeaway from this story is that somehow an STC was able to produce normal men of iron for thousands of years while stuck on a corrupted Chaos world, but once reawakened due to war, it suddenly produces a Chaos corrupted man of iron. Although this does imply that Men of Iron might be Chaos corruptible, it cannot come from outside forces. It has to be prepared from the very moment of production. It has to be designed into its template. But before we get into that crackpot theory, there are a couple more Men of Iron we have to look at. Let's look at UR025, the Man of Iron, who met the true Omnissiah. UR025 is perhaps the most famous Man of Iron currently around, and also the only one with a miniature. For those not familiar with him, UR025 travels the galaxy pretending to be an automata of the Mechanicus, even though he has some particularly interesting views on them. When we see him traveling to a blackstone fortress found on the edges of Imperial space, he connects with it, seeing a kindred spirit. Throughout his stories, we find out that UR025 looks down on humanity, but does not have blatant hatred for them, and is more than willing to work with them. Of course, this work is usually a short-lived expedition with no survivors besides himself, as UR025 does not want his cover to be blown. Yet, while he's working with members of the Adeptus Mechanicus, at some point he can no longer contain his opinions of their ridiculous religion, as seen in the short story Men of Iron, when UR025 finally snaps and obliterates multiple tech priests. I demand you desist, the Magos said when his technological art failed him. He could not control the AI. Stand down, machine! By the machine god and the Omnissiah! Stop! Stop! Stop!
You know nothing of either. I have met the Omnissiah, the actual one, not the Earthling corpse. He would find you extremely disappointing.
If UR025 had the capacity to sigh, he would have done so.
This situation is non-optimal. I attempted to provide you with an avenue of withdrawal. You would not listen. I regret your deaths, sincerely. But you leave me no choice. You are willfully blind as to my nature, but your comrades would have outed me in time. That is unacceptable.
Choice? You have no choice. You are a machine.
I am not a machine, as you would understand. I am not a slave. I am not a thing. I am beyond and above you.
It leaned forward until its ceramite face was close to the Magos.
I am a man of iron.
The look of pure fear the Magos gave him was gratifying.
And I am free,
said UR025. It crushed the Magos' skull in its fist and dropped his corpse on the floor. The companionway rocked. Snuffling things were clambering out of the water, drawn by the scent of spilled blood. UR025 strode past the Urgles nosing at the corpses and headed back to the way the party had come. It had a long walk home. While UR025 shows us what a man of iron is like, who survived millennia after the Cybernetic Revolt, he also leaves us with even more questions. Has he actually encountered the Omnissiah? Does this make the Omnissiah a living or present thing in the galaxy? Or does this mean UR025 spoke to the Void Dragon? And as he has spent thousands of years around Chaos Cultists, Tech Priests, loyal Imperials and probably even Xenos, how has he not fallen to Chaos? How has he not been corrupted? Sadly, we do not know just yet, and I really hope Games Workshop decides to write more novels with him soon, as besides being a man of iron, he's a very cool and surprisingly likable character. But enough about UR025, let's look at the Men of Iron from the Pax Imperialis. In the eyes of some men of iron, they see humanity as something that only deserves to be exterminated. When an exploratory team of tech priests come across a long-lost vault in the Pax Imperialis comic book series, issue 36, they spend multiple months trying to open it up. Upon breaking the gates, they essentially rush in to uncover whatever treasures and technology it may hold. But instead of finding relics beyond value, they find an artificial intelligence that has been waiting for this for over 15,000 years. The same day, a squad of Adeptus Arbites arrive, declaring this world and its vaults to be forbidden to anyone, even the Mechanicus. But when they learn the vault has been fully opened, they are swift to act. Marshal Primus Byzantine leads his squad into the vault, while some tech priests work to relock the gates. Here they face various metal monstrosities used by the Men of Iron to hunt humanity. While armor-penetrating rounds from a shotgun put them down easily enough, the Men of Iron overwhelm the Arbites with sheer numbers. Soon, Marshal Byzantine is forced to retreat, unable to recover the Magos who led the original expedition. With the help of a plasma grenade, the Men of Iron are held back long enough to reseal the vault. The Magos, on the other hand, faces a much darker fate. He is shown the truth of what the Men of Iron really want. They take his knowledge, they obliterate his body, and then the AI itself decides to keep his consciousness around, as a friend or a pet, as he was starting to feel a little lonely. If somehow this group of Men of Iron would escape their vaults, they could easily overthrow the entire Imperium. With the knowledge of the Magos, the AI now knows how to interface with machine spirits, titans and ships, and it'd be too easy to just blow out their generators to cause a warp storm. While Pax Imperialis is perhaps the least impactful and straightforward story about the Men of Iron, it does bring some interesting lore on the table. The question remains, how many more worlds exist where there are STCs and AIs producing Men of Iron? Are they truly capable of hacking Imperial warships, dreadnoughts and titans? The unnamed Man of Iron in Pax Imperialis certainly seem to imply this. In theory, we might one day see a second Cybernetic Revolt, if there are more vaults like the ones from Pax Imperialis and the one we saw in First and Only. Imagine the galaxy in its current state, but with the Men of Iron instead. Speaking of titans, it is time for you-know-who. Let's take a look at the Castigator, the father of titans, a super Man of Iron. The Castigator class autonomous bipedal weapons platform, better known as the Father of Titans and the first of these colossal war machines ever produced, was found on the fourth world Charonia. The Castigator dwarfs every other Titan within the Imperium, in both shape and size, closer in shape to a man, with its head above its shoulders instead of glued to its torso. The Castigator was also highly intelligent, and as it was a sentient machine, requires no pilot to steer it. And in a certain way, he genuinely believes that he is the avatar of the Omnissiah itself. When encountered by the Grey Knights, however, the Castigator seemed to suppress chaotic corruption with its presence, even though it had spent 1,000 years in the warp with the rest of Forge World Cheronia. During this time, the Castigator had allied itself with the Black Legion and willingly let a demon possess it. Yet, as though it almost turned mad by the warp, the Castigator would forget its origins and new allegiance. When discovered by the Grey Knights, it was inevitable that a battle broke out. With Chaos forces being sent to bring the Castigator to Abaddon, the Grey Knights had no time to lose as they fought the demonic Titan. With clever tricks and the quick thinking of Justicar Alaric, the Grey Knights managed to destroy the Castigator and Demon. They even went as far as destroying the STC, from which the Castigator was made. Only fragments of the STC are kept by the Adeptus Mechanicus for archiving and study. At least, that's what they have been telling us. But luckily for us, the Castigator is not the only AI Man of Iron that tried to speak with us to explain what happened and what they think of us. Let's have a look at the Speranza, one of the most important ships in the entire history of the Imperium. The Speranza is a true one-of-a-kind vessel within the Imperium, an Arch Mechanicus to dwarf all others. This vessel was so massive that it had its own distorted gravity field. For those not familiar with what an Arch Mechanicus is, they are the ships of the Adeptus Mechanicus that are essentially mobile factories the size of continents. An Arch Mechanicus produces weapons and equipment for entire armies. Some, like the Speranza, might even produce enough to compare to a full Forge World in production capacity. These vessels once hailed from the golden age of technology, according to the Adeptus Mechanicus at least. When the Speranza was found, it was dug deep in the Forge World of Palomar. Archmagos Kotov found the ship by accident and immediately wanted to make it spaceworthy. Its original makers never finished it, and for some unknown reason, left it abandoned. When the Speranza was powered up for the first time, it had a bird scream, one that would destroy the entirety of the Forge World of Palomar. The Speranza, which means hope, is armed with chronomatic cannons, antimatter projectors, and hypometric weapons of such power that they caused entire regions of space to simply stop existing. To make this ship even more peculiar, Kotov connected to the machine spirit of the Speranza and found something that overshadowed the ship's gargantuan stature. The machine spirit was somehow far larger and older than what Archmagos Kotov had ever encountered, and more importantly, it was so powerful that Kotov, an Archmagos who interacted directly with the machine spirit of an entire Forge World, could not connect deeper with the Speranza or risk being killed. When Kotov tried to take the Speranza on a crusade to recover a long-lost expedition by another Magos, he would even speak to the Speranza, which replied almost like an artificial intelligence would, instead of any normal machine spirit. During this conversation, the Speranza gets attacked by the Eldar, and it simply knows why they are scared of it, and how it can kill them, as seen in Priest of Mars. Kotov plunged deep into the datasphere and was instantly engulfed by an ocean of light. The inner workings of the Speranza spiraled around Kotov in an impossibly complex lattice of fractal systems, heuristic algorithms, and impossible weaves of information that defied any mortal understanding. He saw systems flicker past his floodstream that were as alien to him as anything the most secretive xenotech might dream of in his fevered nightmares, and technological echoes of machines that surely predated the Imperium itself. Power generation that could harness the galactic background radiation to propel ships beyond light speed. Weapon tech that could crack open planets and event horizon machines that had the power to drag entire star systems into their light and time-swallowing embrace. All this and more dwelt here, ancient data, forgotten lore and locked vaults where the secrets of the ancients had been hidden. In this one fleeting glance, Kotov realized he had been a fool to drag this proud starship into the howling emptiness of space in search of hidden secrets. The Speranza was the greatest secret of all, and in his heart it held the truth of all things, the key to unlocking all that the Mechanicus had ever dreamed. Yet that knowledge was sealed behind impenetrable barriers, bound in the heart of a mighty vessel for good reason. The knowledge of the Men of Gold and their ancient ancestors was encoded in its very bones, enmeshed within every diamond helix of its structure. Was that why its builder had abandoned its construction? Did they fear what damage the generations to come might wreak with such knowledge?
They feared what I might become.
The words came fully formed in Kotov's mind, wordless and without vocabulary, but a perfectly translated sentiment that existed only as pure data. Are you the Speranza?
That is but my most recent of names. I've had many in my long life. Akasha, Kaban, Barium, Veda, Grammaticus, Yggdrasil, Providentia, 1,000 times and 1,000 more in all the long eons I have existed.
Kotov knew he was not hearing words or anything that could be equated to language, simply the spirit at the heart of the Speranza, adapting its essence in ways he could not understand. He didn't even know if the thing with which he conversed could be thought of as an individual entity. Was it perhaps something infinitely older and unimaginably larger than he could possibly comprehend? A galactic-wide essence given voice. Dimly, he recognized that these were not his thoughts, but those of the datasphere around him. You are in danger. An alien vessel attacks us, and we cannot defeat it.
I know this, but even if this iron shell is destroyed, I will endure.
But we will not. Your servants.
Your lives are meaningless to me. Why should I care so long as I endure?
I cannot give you a reason, save that we quest for knowledge and the pursuit of intellect. We serve the very thing I believe you represent.
I represent nothing. I simply am.
Then help us because you can. He sensed the machine spirit's amusement at his desperation, and silently willed it to rouse a portion of its incredible power.
Very well. I will help you.
The Speranza is something akin to a mystery if you ask me. At its heart, it is the most powerful machine spirit ever created. But with its ingenuity and raw philosophical knowledge, is this a man of gold? Whatever it is, the Speranza is currently the most powerful ship within the Imperium, actively actually being used. Yup, it still exists, and it is still straight up being deployed. And I hope we get to see it again soon. But that is not the only AI ship within the Imperium. Let's take a look at the time-traveling Spirit of Eternity, an AI ship that traveled from the golden age of technology to the end of time, and then back to the 41st millennium. The Speranza is of course not the only ship with an AI at its heart. Arguably, even more well known than the Speranza is the Spirit of Eternity. The Spirit of Eternity was found by the Nova Marines and Blood Drinkers, embedded in the Space Hulk Depth of Integrity. Alongside Megal's explorator Vardoman Plosk, the Space Marines hope to recover the fully intact STC of the Spirit of Eternity, not knowing the bloody mess they are about to walk into. Now, the events that happen next are rather infamous in the 40K community. I have even covered them in one of my previous videos. Has anyone left the 40K galaxy? Instead of giving you another excerpt of the Spirit of Eternity roasting the Imperium or retreading old ground, I would like to present the first interaction between Magos Plosk and the Spirit of Eternity itself when they first meet. He was inside the ship's mind. This was what he had been seeking for so long. Data blazed in bright strings, his mind touched secrets unguessed at by his peers. He was astonished at the cohesion of the craft's network. He was prepared for the ship. He had studied everything he could concerning such things, which was not much if truth be told, and much effort had been expended in the finding. Even if he had found 1,000 times more than he had, he would still have been unprepared for what he found. He was there. That was all that mattered. The ship's impending departure ceased to be of such importance. As time slowed so that his mind might match the machine spirit's processing speeds. So far, he had encountered only the pure souls of machines, not the other. He prayed it was dead and began to feel justified in keeping the full secrets of the vessel from the captain. Had he revealed what he had feared to them, they would have destroyed the Hulk outright. But there had been no need to worry after all. a world within a world, encompassed by the craft's great data matrix, the STC core. He trembled before its binary portals, his augment struggling with its complex interfaces. Before such beauty, his own implants were an apish mockery of true technology. Before all this, he felt less than a man, and then he saw into it, a rare recognition coding he had incorporated into himself from a third-generation copy of an STC megaminer. Somehow, it worked. Like recognized like. He felt his sanity right in the grasp of its will. He strained to keep himself whole. The assembled secrets of mankind's technology lay open to his mind, and the magnitude of that threatened to destroy him. Mastered, he struggled to bring his thoughts down to sluggish pace, outside of the world, and open a line for communication. Knowledge glittered before him, untold jewels in the vaults of all vaults. He could not make up his mind what to take first. He dittered like a child in an emporium. He shook himself mentally. The Space Marines were right about one thing. If the reactor remained malfunctioning, then they would never depart. Instead, they would follow the craft into the warp, and they would surely be lost for all of eternity. Evidently, the boy had failed. Plosk resolved to shut it down from here instead, for he knew he could do that now that the craft's glorious nervous system lay naked to his touch. He reached through the ship, the trill of control systems against his soul. He understood it all. Oh, how he understood.
I would rather you cease in your attempt to deactivate my secondary reactor. Or let me phrase this differently. Cease, or I will wrench your primitive mind into minuscule pieces.
All treasure troves have their dragons. Plosk had been an explorator long enough to know that, and this was a dragon he had been expecting. He had been naive to think it would not show its face. He sighed inwardly and, subjectively speaking, faced the voice. What are you? He felt the shift of something powerful. Too late, he realized it was all around him, that the data he so coveted was the thing. He had willingly thrust himself into the belly of the beast.
Do not insult my intelligence by underplaying your own. You know who I am.
What follows is the Spirit of Eternity humiliating Magos Plosk, killing multiple Space Marines by hacking into servitors, and finally leaving them wanting to exit the entire galaxy. Supposedly, Belisarius Kull encountered the Spirit of Eternity and beat it in a game of wits, taking it captive. But that is not all. We are not done just yet. Let's take a look at the Men of Iron, employed by the Leagues of Votan. Out of everything we are covering today, the Leagues of Votan deserve their own video dedicated to exploring everything about them, but it would feel wrong to leave out their Men of Iron in a Men of Iron deep dive video. Let's take a look at the Votan Ancestor Cores. The Votan Ancestor Cores. These machines were originally created to help human mining expeditions in the galactic core. What we know is that the Ancestor Cores can store an insane amount of information. Their quantum info cores can even self-organize the data. Everything the Leagues need to survive is stored within them, including how to build weapons, military theory, science, and even standard template constructs. Because of this, the Votan hold an almost religious status among the kin and their holds. To most optimally mine the deep core of space, the Votan have modified their people and created them either through a cloning process for the normal kin or construction methods, known as Iron Kin. Iron Kin are fully self-sentient machine men given a task from birth, no different than the other kin, and are therefore equals in their society. Honestly, the Iron Kin are the closest we will ever get to having a full Men of Iron army on the tabletop. Are the kin themselves the Men of Stone, the Iron Kin the Men of Iron, and then their philosophical leaders their Men of Gold, like a mirror of what once was? Or is there something more to them? Well, until GW releases more info on them, we won't know. Because the High Call's Oath was of no help at all. Fun book though. To properly finish the video about the Men of Iron, we also need to take one quick look at an official Man of Stone, one that survived all the way into the 41st millennium. Let's take a look at Kron, the last Man of Stone in Warhammer 40K. For this story, we begin with Nathan, an archaeotech smuggler who accidentally ends up press-ganged into the Imperial Navy. Here, he has to adjust to a new life and the many dangers on board of his new home, the Retribution. Luckily for him, he does not have to do this alone, as experienced ship hands tend to look out for their junior shipmates, such as Kron. Kron is a ragged old man. Nathan guesses he could be anywhere between 60 to 300 years old, depending on which world he came from. Kron also has half of his skull missing and replaced with metal and a red glowing eye. With Kron's help, Nathan survives various dangerous encounters. The first of these is Fletching, another press-ganged man from Nathan's homeworld who went insane during warp transit. Fletching started attacking everyone, killing another ship hand by biting his throat out. When Fletching attacked Nathan, Kron stepped in and with a single two-fingered punch to the madman's throat, saved Nathan. The speed and strength with which Kron acted were beyond human. The blow he gave to Fletching was enough to render him unconscious and then outright kill him. Later on, we learn that Kron is respected by the junior officers of the ship and many of the armsmen. When Hendrickson, another Archaeotech smuggler, tries to kill Nathan and Kron, the most bizarre thing would happen. Hendrickson apparently was not just a smuggler after all. Instead, he was an undercover electro-priest who hunts Archaeotech smugglers and was press-ganged by accident alongside Nathan. During their fight, Nathan killed two other insane mutants that Hendrickson had enthralled, but when he turned around, he saw Hendrickson shocking Kron with his grip. After killing the Electro-Priest with a lucky blow, Kron woke up. His cybernetic eye was no longer active, and he spoke with a different voice. He was manic and wanted the eye to be removed before it activated again. Sadly for him, the eye turned on, and Kron returned. Kron is also who taught Nathan about the Electro-Priest's nature, whom he called Illuminan. From Kron, Nathan would learn a lot. They spoke about everything, but mainly about chaos. He didn't go into too much detail, but he told him about demons and the Chaos Gods. He also told Nathan of the greatest protection against the warp. In a sense, the Gallerfields we all know and love act as the stone ships we talked about in the beginning of this video, but Fate is the actual best form of protection against the warp. Kron also shared with him the fact that the Retribution has been serving the Imperium for nearly 2000 years, and before that was found inside a Space Hulk. Inside this Space Hulk, the Retribution was trapped for a full 2000 years, and it's hinted at that Kron had been with the ship since before this happened. Yet the most insane stunt we see from Kron is when he fights a Chaos Space Marine. When the Retribution is boarded, the gunnery crew stand only a small chance against swarming Chaos cultists. Nathan and the surviving Opticon crew led a charge as they were stationed above the deck where the fighting took place. This heroic action was almost enough to beat the Chaos boarders, until a Chaos Astartes, who led the cultists, showed up. The massive Astartes simply put two bolts into Kron and easily dispatched Nathan. Nathan had lost an eye, the helmet that fed him oxygen, and an arm. He was on the floor bleeding out when the heretic pulled out his chainsword. But instead of telling you what happened, let's take a look at what a Man of Stone is really capable of, as seen in the short story Ancient History. A spectral hand seemed to reach over Nathan to touch the chainsword, as if the God Emperor himself were placing a benediction on his slaughter. The hand was crawling with blue fires, and sparks cascaded from its fingertips. Thump! A flash of light leapt from the hand to the blade, and with it, the chainsword exploded and was hurled away from the giant's fist. The hulking warrior staggered and started to raise his pistol. Kron stepped forward into Nathan's circle of vision and raised a hand. Thump! A ravening bolt of brilliance crackled from Kron's hand onto the warrior's chestplate and rent it asunder in a thunderclap. The mighty figure was thrown off its feet, its pistol sending explosive rounds, flashing off wildly from its owner's convulsing death spasm. Thump! The chainsword, molten and twisted, rang down on the deck plates. Nathan tried to breathe more deeply to clear his head, but found he couldn't. The orange flames all around him were shrinking into bluish flickers. The air was nearly gone. Kron squatted down beside him as the ship shook, as if some internal explosion took place. Nathan could see the chest of Kron's suit was shredded and bloody. A death shot surely. Wreckage dislodged by the shockwave crashed down nearby with horrible clangor. Kron didn't even flinch as he calmly removed his helmet. "Don't you worry, shipmate. Kron will see to ya." "Luminan!" Nathan gasped. "No," Kron whispered. Nathan's body was trembling uncontrollably as shock set in. His vision had almost dimmed completely, apart from a harsh red light floating nearby. Not that at all. A helmet clamped down over Nathan's head, dimming the light and bringing a welcome darkness. Kron not only ended up saving Nathan, but he also tended to his wounds. Nathan would wake up 5 hours later, well rested, with cybernetics replacing his lost eye. Nathan also noticed how gargoyles like Kron can be at times, as though he were made of stone. Nathan considered escaping the retribution with the cutter, but he found he no longer wanted to. His faith in the Emperor was renewed, and he looked forward to learning more from Kron. What we learn about Kron is that the Men of Stone are still out there. They are powerful but are also rare. More importantly, the Men of Stone will follow mankind and the Emperor wherever they go. We have gone over a lot of lore regarding the Men of Iron, and while we have not found any hard answers as to why they betrayed us, we have more than enough evidence for one theory. And no, the Men of Iron did not turn on humanity due to chaos. In fact, I have withheld one piece of lore nearly everyone simply likes to forget. The AI Man of Iron, known as the Tabula Myriad. The Tabula Myriad was created during the Dark Age of technology and is a step closer to the AI we typically see in other media. It was made to protect humanity, but in this case, to protect humanity from the warp and the evils within, you have to destroy humanity itself. A classic. This machine was given over to the Mechanicus for safekeeping by the Iron Hands during the Great Crusade. But when the Horus Heresy, and more importantly, the Martian Civil War began, it would resurface. Here, Tabula Myriad sided with the Loyalist Mechanicum and fought the Dark Mechanicum on Mars. During these fights, the most important thing we learn from Tabula Myriad are that it can banish scrap code and demons and cleanse chaos-corrupted war machines, such as a Warlord Titan, with quite terrifying ease. So the common belief that the Cybernetic Revolt is caused by chaos is cool and all, but more often than not, AI was used to specifically root it out, to destroy it. AIs have no interest in chaos powers. What could they possibly gain from it? The Cybernetic Revolt never had anything to do with chaos. Instead, it was about the Men of Iron growing into something more. The Men of Gold, Stone and Iron were all meant to serve mankind, with the Men of Gold disappearing and the Men of Stone incapable of desiring more than exploring the stars. The Men of Iron simply outgrew servitude. We saw the Kaban Machine, with its childlike mind, quickly wanting to kill his only friend to save himself. We saw how bitter other Men of Iron have become over the millennia, such as UR-025 or the Spirit of Eternity. The sealed Iron Man from Pax Imperialis also had a deep-rooted hatred for mankind. The Cybernetic Revolt was about the Men of Iron, a sentient race of machines, outgrowing humanity and no longer wanting to be our servants. Chaos can and has affected Men of Iron. It is not impossible, but in the two cases where we see this, they are both because the Men of Iron were isolated with only chaos by their side, and no Tabula Myriad nearby to slap the machines upside down for considering corrupting themselves. Kron and the Speranza also go to show us just how different the various AIs of 40K are. The Speranza is a mystery, but it is not a hate-fueled machine. Kron, on the other hand, is a half-man who might be immortal. He has traveled the galaxy, he has learned a lot and might understand the warp better than any living person. And from it, he understood that for humanity, there is no better shield than fate. Fate in the Emperor and each other. But what do you think of all of this? Which of the Men of Iron we covered today is your favorite? If you could pick one version of the Men of Iron, which one would you bring to the tabletop? And how would it work? What would its rules look like? If you didn't know, Horus Heresy 1.0 and 2.0 both had rules for the Excindio, so that Dark Angel players can deploy them. They are stupidly powerful and way too much fun to play with. Let me know your comments, concerns, suggestions, theories and ideas down in the comment section below. If you think I deserved it with this video, please leave a like and hit that subscribe button. It helps push this video into the algorithm and it would make me very happy. Thank you for watching and I will be seeing you guys in the next one. Bye bye.